Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Economic Empowerment Opportunities Subcommittee. It is part of the overarching body of the African American Task Force, which was created by the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus in conjunction with our Justice for All agenda. I'm very delighted to have so many great people with us. And on today, I would just like to take a moment just for introductions of those who were on the committee. I'll start. I'm Sherry Dorsey Walker, State Representative for the 3rd District and Chair of the Economic Empowerment Subcommittee.
Charlie Weatherspoon, Integral CFO Services, serial entrepreneur, and working with the African and African American communities.
Good evening, I'm Rick Deadweiler, Corteva AgriScience, a longstanding member of the business community here in Delaware, former chairman of the Newcastle County Chamber of Commerce, serving as advisor and board of governors member with the state Chamber of Commerce.
Good evening, I'm Dan Young. I'm the director of the Doctor of Business Administration program at Goldie Beacon College, also longtime serial entrepreneur. Certainly glad to be here.
I'm Kyle Myers, CEO of Numa Capital Group and Morningside Asset Management, also an entrepreneur here in Delaware, having offices in Delaware, Chicago, Atlanta, and now Barbados. And glad to be a part of the organization and this effort. Thank you.
Karen Burton. I am a business strategist where I help businesses to create alliances and partnerships for success. I am the past president of the National Association of Women Business Owners, the Delaware chapter, and I have been involved and engaged with businesses related to women business owners in this state of Delaware and procurement opportunities.
Saron Cade, Secretary of Labor.
Siobhan White, the Director of the State Office of Supplier Diversity.
Ms. White, do you mind doing your introduction once more? Your audio went out toward the end, please. Thank you.
Sure. I'm Siobhan White. I am the Director of the State of Delaware Office of Supplier Diversity.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Tanya Williamson. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a serial entrepreneur in the state of Delaware. I'm the CEO of Married to the Ring and Tabs, which is a business development firm. I'm a professional certified relationship coach and business consultant. I specialize in addressing the ever-growing challenge that new or existing entrepreneurs face because of not having or knowing how to prepare, acquire, and implement the tools needed to sustain or grow a successful business. And we serve various markets as it relates to our coaching organization as well.
Has everyone who's on the committee introduced him or herself? I don't want to leave anyone off before we move on. Thank you to all the subcommittee members. And at this time, I'd like to call for an acceptance of the minutes.
Motion to accept.
Do I have a motion for the acceptance of the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
There is Rick Deadweiler, second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved in second. All those in favor, salute by saying aye.
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 Thank you. Now we shall get into our robust conversation, the topic for this afternoon. Our discussion will center around how do we, people of color, become involved with the wealth management opportunities in our state. What we have found down through the years is, and actually generations, is people of color have been left out of wealth management opportunities in the state of Delaware. While the state of Delaware was the first state, we have a lot of work to do in order to ensure that we are the most efficient state as it pertains to wealth management and people of color. Delaware has the 8th highest population for African Americans in the nation, and our wealth management needs to reflect those numbers. So I'm glad to be joined by, of course, our subcommittee members. And I did notice that our state treasurer is here with us, Treasurer Colleen Davis. And thank you so much for joining us. Additionally, we have people from up and down the state, and I would like to acknowledge that we have the Honorable Lamar Gunn Sr. with us, a wealth manager from Kent County, who has helped many people up and down the state to acquire wealth. So when the opportunity presents itself, prayerfully we'll hear from both of them. But I would like to give the subcommittee members an opportunity to kind of talk about this issue. Since we're joined by our state treasurer, if she would like to start the conversation, she is more than welcome, unless she desires to have listened to the subcommittee members first about some of the concerns that we may have regarding wealth management in the state of Delaware.
Sure. I just want to say hello. I think that it's actually important for those of us elected officials in the world of finance and in general to hear and listen. So I'm actually just going to say hello, and then I'd like to hear some of the thoughts and concerns that may arise as we continue the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Treasurer Colleen Davis, for joining us. I know Kyle Myers has a lot of knowledge as it pertains to wealth management as a subcommittee member. Would like to give him the opportunity to kind of open up this conversation and talk to us about ways that we can, in fact, get a larger portion of the pie as it pertains to African Americans in wealth management. So at this moment, I'll turn over the conversation to Kyle Myers.
Thank you, Sherry. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Having been an institutional asset manager now for nearly 15 years, I've had the great fortune of working across the country with a number of plan sponsors, and High Treasurer Colleen, I know we've met before and spoken before through the help of Wale. And what I found is that around the country, there are states and cities that have made the bold initiative to have diversity and inclusion become a very real thing, where minority participation in the management of the state's public pension fund, the treasury assets, have at a minimum targets, at a maximum accountability factors that will allow minority-owned businesses both in the state and in around the country to participate in a piece of the pie that has a ticket to it that, if you will, kind of creates its own annuity, an annualized revenue stream by working with these pension funds will allow small businesses or business investment firms to take from the revenue that they earn and then have an impact back to the community by investing in other small businesses from other industries. So for example, I can look in the Delaware Pension Fund, the state of Delaware Pension Fund, and see all of the asset managers that are in the fund, many of which are earning fees of 2 and 20, 1 and 10. That's 2% of an annual revenue stream. So if a firm is granted $500 million by the state of Delaware, which plenty of them are, those guys are able to earn incredible fees to the tune of $10 million per year just in recurring fees, let alone the upside of 20% of anything that they make over top of the bogey. And those opportunities are vast. We have opportunities that are vast here in Delaware that could be shared in similar ways that Baltimore has taken the initiative. The state of New York has taken the initiative, New York City, the state of Maryland, Obviously, Illinois was one of the first and largest to do it, as well as City of Chicago. CalPERS has one of the largest, they have the largest program in probably in the world, just because of the size of their fund, over $356 billion. Texas teachers, Texas retirement system, a number of places all around the country have already taken this initiative to have diversity and inclusion be a real thing in the pension fund. And they're in a place like Delaware, and as both as small as we are, but as impactful as we are, we have an unsitting vice president running for president now from our state. We get a ton of notoriety around the country, but in a place like this, you would think that access to those funds and access for asset managers from diverse backgrounds, Black, Latino, Asian, Indian, would be able to participate both in the state's plan, the county plan, and the city's plan. And I can look across all three plans and see zero participation across all three plans. And there's something that's saddening about that, but also it gives us hope because, where you have the will to create change, we can figure out a way to get it done in a manner that is helpful to not just the plan itself, but to the community that the plan actually represents. And so, having had the resource, I did not mention in my introduction that I still am the president of the Philadelphia chapter of NASP, National Association of Securities Professionals, which is a trade organization focused on diversity and inclusion in the investment business. It was founded by former Mayor Maynard Jackson out of Atlanta, Joyce Johnson, and I forget his name, but his son played. His son was on a different world. His name is escaping me. Lamar might remember, but anyway, he was the first African American to have a seat on the New York Stock Exchange. And so when they founded the organization, it was with the goal of seeing more participation in these funds. And so there's tremendous opportunity, there's tremendous power that can be both leveraged and utilized to have an impact back to Delaware residents and Delaware businesses.
Kyle, can I just ask you a question?
Sure.
Well, I guess two questions. The first was, when I connected you with the pension office, I'd love to know how that conversation went with Susan Grant and those folks over there. Mm-hmm. And then you also mentioned that you don't see diversity across all three plans. Did you mean at the state level, the municipal level, and the local level, or?
Yeah. Yeah.
I got it. Okay. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't handle the pensions for the state or the county or the local municipalities, but I do. I do handle the deferred compensation.
Okay.
And we RFP'd that book of business a couple of years ago. And one of the things that was actually included in that RFP was diversity and reinvestment in local small businesses and smaller communities. Which is it's sort of how we try to ensure, what you're describing, that reinvestment into the communities is some of what we try to do to try to drive not only diversity and inclusion in our asset managers, but also sort of across the board so that we're getting some of that funding sort of returned to us as well. Sure. I'll wait for.
Sure. I was saying, sure. Yep. I'm following you. Who actually, what consulting firm won that bid for the deferred comp plan?
For deferred compensation, Voya was awarded that. And again, that was before I came into office. That contract was signed and sealed and done, but they did put an effort into creating looking for some diversity. And And then we just recently had another RFP that went out for some of our cash management. So a little bit different type of investment. It doesn't look the same as it does when you're looking at, investing for pensions or a 401k type of product. And that was awarded to SEI. And again, we are able to ensure that some of the funds go into specific investing that goes back into the community.
So very familiar with SEI and Voya, and without a push from the executive like yourself, diversity and inclusion is not on their agenda. There are asset managers who manage pure cash management funds, including our business. We would be able to handle a sleeve of business in the cash management space. This is managing short duration fixed income. And as doing so, it would also create the opportunity for other local wealth managers who have direct access to bond purchasing to kind of understand and learn the backside of the business, the institutional side of the business, where others could participate locally here. Obviously, SEI is a juggernaut. It's going to be very hard for a small, minority-owned, woman-owned asset management firm to compete on a dollar-for-dollar basis. But
right.
Where there's a will to execute, pricing will be fair, I'm sure, as well as delivered services.
Yeah, and that's why we went with SEI. They are a women-owned, and they do have diversity inclusion in as part of their initiatives. So yeah, it was something that we really thought about, and I appreciate you noting that.
Erin Burton, I have a question for the RFP that went out. How was the announcement made, and how did you target who you sent the RFP to receive a proposal back?
Yeah, so the RFP actually goes out onto the state website where you would look for that type of thing. So if you're involved in asset management, you typically are on the notification list, and it's made publicly available. But if we don't get much of a response, which sometimes we don't, we'll also put it out through NASP. We'll put it out through NAST. So the National Association of Securities Professionals typically receives notification from us. The DBA, the Delaware Bankers Association, will typically get it, even if it's not necessarily sort of banking, because they tend to have folks that are looking and a number of connections. And then we do it also through the National Association of State Treasurers and the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA. So, and then there are several others that are sort of like LinkedIn and places like that. We'll tend to put a little sort of social media type of splash out there just to try to get as many responses as possible. But I think to Kyle's point, sometimes it can be tough to compete. So if you're kind of a smaller entity, or you have kind of a smaller book of business, sometimes it can be harder to compete, and that's why it's important that we're sort of looking for those opportunities.
Well, the reason why I position that question is so that it's documented in the minutes on the areas that you put out, right? Because it provides all of us an understanding of your outreach. Now, is this something that you would not work with the Office of Minority Supply and Diversity, to which we have a lot of businesses that get certified with the state? Is this not something that goes to their office as well?
So it's on
March in. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So it's on the Delaware procurement website. So it's generally available to everyone. But if you would like to also receive it directly, we can always make that adjustment.
Make our vendors aware.
Question, thank you.
Yeah, we usually we work with GSS on the bids portal. And so we make our vendors aware to make sure that they sign up to receive the notifications for their specific industry.
Right, I'm familiar with the process for the state. I was wondering if they provided the information to you, Siobhan, to distribute it out to those that are certified. That's all.
No, we haven't received any information for a bid for this particular RFP.
Okay, so if your office did not receive it and you do certification for minority businesses for opportunity of advancement, and then now I'm hearing that it's just put up on the state website, can someone just help me to understand it a little bit better?
I think that's something that we probably should have to work with GSS on. I don't get information on all of the bids that go up. And typically when I put out information on my listserv, it is private information, private RFPs. And typically we just use the GSS bids notification portal to make sure that they have access to the information. So if the bids is coming up, they can receive the email.
Hey, thank you. This is Rick Deadweiler. Treasurer Davis, thank you for joining us this evening for this conversation. I had just a couple of questions for you that you might know me as a non-finance person, but someone who's familiar with the business community and access and opportunity. What is the minimum asset that would be necessary for RFPs? You know, for a small, as Mr. Myers mentioned, for small businesses to be able to participate in the RFP process. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, so it actually it depends on the it depends on the book of business, right? But I will say that if
This
we're doing
assets under management is, I mean, I'm just thinking about that number. What?
Yeah, so typically what we'll do is for some of our managers, it's like $1 million, something like that. We'll sort of divvy up the assets. So if we're talking about cash management, it's typically 1.5 million that we're going to ask you to be able to manage for us. But it really just depends. It depends on what comes up for RFP. A lot of the contracts that we sign are for 3 to 5 years. Some are 7. And so when they come up, just as an example, the cash management contract is handled through my office. We do all the negotiating and things like that, but some of the stipulations of the contract are actually set by the guidelines of the Cash Management Policy Board. So as an example, we may not be allowed to work with a portfolio manager that has less than $5 billion of assets under management. And that is because of the guidelines that have been set forward by the Cash Management Policy Board. And so some of those restrictions, unfortunately, come from outside of my office, and they've been put in place. You know, some of those guidelines have been put in place before I was born, but I'm held to those statutes, and we do the best that we can. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely, and that's partially why I appreciate being part of this conversation.
Madam Treasurer, just to add to that, Rick, and I think that's a very great question, because what we found through NASP is that this is historically how women and minority-owned businesses have been kept out of the game. Incredible thresholds, $5 billion, right, in assets under management. In a nutshell, if every state, the size of Delaware alone, which is a $9 billion fund, and I believe the Office of Cash Management is about $11 billion. with those kind of standards, you would only have one minority-owned shop, Pew Capital, that was even eligible to be included in the RFP if Pew Capital even won the RFP. What Chicago, what Texas, what others have done is they've legislated, to the treasurer's point, those policies that forced or only made available the opportunity to get in if you're already a big organization. So typically it works like this. John Doe worked at PIMCO funds for 10 years. John Doe decides to spin out of PIMCO after getting a job at PIMCO after 10 years, and he leaves PIMCO with 20 billion in assets under management. I can assure you that there are no Black-owned firms for certain that spun out of a big shop with those kind of opportunities, and very few women-owned shops have been able to spin out with those kinds of opportunities. And therefore, the only person that gets more assets or able to grow their firm or their business is the person that spun out of BlackRock, PIMCO, or wherever they came from. And so systemically, to the treasurer's point, those rules were put in place to impede smaller organizations and people. And what I think this committee, what the treasurer is suggesting, is that we have to figure out a way to bring about legislation that will allow for that change. I believe on our last call, I think it was Siobhan that mentioned that a lot of the issues that she's even seen from our office will have to be legislated because there are foibles in place to stop firms from being able to qualify just on a minimum basic level. For example, the 20% rule. A pension fund, most organizations, public organizations will suggest, well, we don't want to represent any more than 20% of your total assets under management. So if your minimum threshold is 5 billion and you don't want to represent 20% of the firm's assets under management, there is not a Black-owned asset manager capable of handling that size allocation based on the criteria. There's not one. Out of the three largest, Ariel Capital Management, which is Melody Hobson and John Rogers, they're about 13 billion. Eddie Brown down in Baltimore, he is about 14 billion, 15 billion. And then Mary Pugh, she's a fixed income manager. Mary is about 11 billion in fixed income assets. And there you have it. And so from there, you have three organizations that still don't qualify to meet the 20% guideline, coupled with the size restraint, because the two of them together make it more difficult to qualify.
Yeah, Kyle, thanks. And I know Pew Capital well. And you're right, because Mary came out of Washington Mutual.
That's right.
As vice president, she managed that, and Washington Mutual signed with her. So that's one way to get around some of that stuff. We have to look more at being creative around that. But Treasurer, I thank you for being here and discussing this. My concept as a business person, a finance person, is, as we come together as a group, we have to understand what's the low-lying fruit. Back in whenever, because I know those people well, Magic Johnson got $2 billion from CalPERC, not to manage, but to go and develop certain things in certain communities, because they came to me and talked about our community, in which I was on the board in Ohio, to do certain things. They talked to the folks down in, after Katrina, down in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's going with Kyle and you, Madam Treasurer, is trying to think of ways that we can involve ourselves as we evolve ourselves. So the whole issue is the fact that no one you're talking about pew capital, people like that can stand up and do certain things. But there are other ways for us to tap into pension funds. For instance, one of the projects we're looking at in New York State, a big aircraft maintenance project. Pension fund is like, here, whatever you need, we're there. You just have to get a lead. So there are those kind of relationships, because our top guy managed all the money for Mayor Dinkins. So he has a different kind of way of looking at certain things. So I think as we come together and using your office, is coming together with creative ways to do things in the short term as we grow into things that Kyle was talking about for the long term. Because I don't know the rules and regs. I worked in regular banking, so I don't know all the rules and regs around, what managers have to do, don't have to do, all those kind of things. But I think there are ways for us to tap into the various funds to do some of the work that we want to do anyway, as we look at small businesses and projects that are around the state. So that's kind of like the way I view it. So I really thank you for being here and giving us this update, and Kyle with his wonderful knowledge. Thank you.
Yeah, let me, and I had a follow-up. Thanks, Charlie. I had a follow-up to my previous question, Treasurer Davis. I appreciate you being here with us, and maybe you can work with me. You mentioned that the previous group, SEI, that received, I believe it was the cash management contract to manage our cash deferred comp contract. So I just wanted to just double check on that. Just the idea, the woman-owned piece. I mean, that's fantastic. I think it's good for us to lean into to those opportunities. You also mentioned that I'm curious. Do we know? And if we don't have the answer now, that's fine. I think these are more for the record as we continue on this journey of seeking opportunity. How many minority-owned businesses, Black-owned businesses, are doing business? It sounded like Kyle said 0, but I wanted to make sure that we, just put that out there for the meeting minutes. And if not, we need to confirm and validate that there are none, because that represents opportunities for us. And with that said, I then asked a question to you, if in fact that is that we are at 0 small or Black-owned businesses that are doing any work from a wealth management standpoint with the state, would you be willing to work with us to try and elevate that opportunity through some type of legislation that says it's important to diversify to those small, less than $5 billion, or what, I don't know what the right number might be. This is not my area of expertise, but I do understand how to create access and opportunity for groups. So, I mean, just to, while you're here with us, and you clearly by being with us, you've expressed interest, but we certainly would look to hear from you about, your ideas on moving forward on policy opportunities to create that access and opportunity.
Yeah, so the first thing that I will say is when we look at all of our banking contracts and things like that, we have separate banking contracts. Some are local banking and some are more international banking. Those are huge corporations and they're very large banks. We put out an RFP. I specifically contacted smaller community banks that are local to Delaware, and really pressed to try to get more community bank representation. And unfortunately, was not able to get, in fact, a single community bank, smaller bank, to respond to that RFP, unfortunately. And I think that one of the pieces was my team recognized the need to move toward more access, more technological access for folks to be able to do increased banking. And unfortunately, some of our smaller banks were not able to provide the security that was necessary to do that. The other thing that I will say is banking is one of the larger portions of what I do. The pension, I don't have my hands on. And so I couldn't tell you exactly who manages those funds. I do know that some of the asset managers, because I actually put this question out, I said, do you have anybody that you would say is a a female, a minority, someone who's underrepresented in the field of finance. And the response that I received from the Board of Pensions from Susan Grant was that one of the lead asset managers was in fact a minority female. And so they said, you know, that box is checked. Unfortunately, I think we can do better. And you mentioned our deferred compensation. That is currently under Voya. Deferred compensation is, and again, Voya is a very large entity. And SEI is a female-owned asset management group. And to my knowledge, again, I have kind of my fingers around all things Treasury, and some of what you listed is not necessarily under me. But to my knowledge, we don't have any primary minority owned. We do have some who've made an initiative to increase partnership from minorities, but it's not a singular sort of, they're not at the forefront of this space, if you will.
And my last question leans on back on that the oversight component to this, and really the opportunity to pursue a different lens, different oversight opportunity. You mentioned the Cash Management Policy Board.
Yes.
And again, I don't know who they are. I believe my previous knowledge that it's a group that's appointed by way of the governor's office. Am I correct in that?
Yes, and they have not changed for quite some time. In fact, I mentioned, I believe they were first appointed in 1980, which is the same date, same year I was born. And so, so they carry with them a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience. And I think that through the years, we've sort of seen some major financial hits, and they've helped to navigate us through that. So I don't want to discredit the fact that we have a number of individuals who have volunteered literally my lifetime and their expertise. You know, could we see more minorities on that board? Absolutely.
That's my question. Yeah, that's the question that I wanted to pose, is how diverse is that group that's making such important decisions and also providing advisement and counsel to the state leaders on this. Yeah, so that I guess that's the question. So is there any diversity on that policy board?
Well, so we do have Asian American representation as well as female representation that again are folks that are in the finance space. And so I'm sorry, I'm getting text messages from my husband at the same time that I'm talking with all of you.
It's that time. I know it's time of the evening that everything's happening in the house. They're yelling at the hallway down here. I'm trying to shut the door.
Well, so yes, we do have some minorities and some female representation. It's a relatively small board, and I would say that the folks that we've had for a number of years haven't changed a whole lot. And they are doing good work, you know. And so again, I don't want to discredit the work that they're doing. However, I think there is opportunity for increased diversity.
Certainly.
And I apologize, Treasurer. There was a second question you asked me earlier, which was how did my conversation with Susan Grant go?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it was at the time I think she lost her mother or her husband's mother, and every effort to follow up since then has been a blank ticket. So I have gotten zero response since that time, which was about 2 years ago.
Yeah,
if I recall.
Yes, it was. I'm happy to try to connect you guys again, and I'm so sorry that that did not come to fruition. But again, I think it's important.
Yeah, and again, so there's, you know, I know you're familiar with some of the systems we have through NASP and through the financial sector, so we can peer right into every pension fund and look into, and this is again, the pension fund is out of your bailiwick, I know. You know, I'm looking at every name on this asset management list, and there isn't an African American owned or Latino owned firm inside of the fund. And to your point, there have been funds that have been hired since 1984 in the pension fund, collecting more than, if I'm getting this number correct, collecting more than, it doesn't say their assets under advisement, but they're a venture fund. I'd never really heard of a venture fund being in a pension fund since 1984. At some point, venture funds become full private equity funds. So that's an interesting dynamic.
Yes, and I think it's another thing to sort of look at performance as well. And I think again there may be an opportunity there. We're always looking at performance, and we're looking at risk. And I think that one of the things that I think about is when we can say, hey, I can compete with you in the area of performance and risk. So you really should be thinking about me as an asset manager.
No, we appreciate that. And so I think one of the things I wanted to provide to the committee is the study that Northern Trust did to show that minority and emerging managers, investment managers, have outperformed the larger asset managers from a performance and risk perspective because we're smaller, we're nimble. You know, our decisions are made in-house. We're not voting by committee. We are, you know, fully focused on risk measures as opposed to, you know, running the bureaucracy of a large business. And so, you know, so usually when I have these conversations, I think when we first met, I shared this with you. I've examined all of the small cap value managers and all of the large cap managers in the portfolio, and not one has performance that is more compelling than what we've done. Again, you know, unearthing that, I think at the time there was a lifetime appointment employee over top of the pension fund who you couldn't even get a phone call back from. So Suzanne is the first call that I actually received from the pension fund in 11 years of trying. She was the very first call back. So, you know, I think to the point that Mr. Witherspoon was making, I think, you know, in terms of being able to work with the Treasurer's office on the Treasury side, and I stated the Treasury was 11 billion, it's 4 billion. I had that one backwards. Being able to work on the Treasury side, we have tremendous asset managers who are women, who are minority, who can handle pools of capital in the short duration fixed income space. And if legislation and rules are in the way, you know, I hope that the goal of this body is to fix the rules that keep people away and out of the opportunity.
Yeah, well, Kyle, that's a great point, and to that end, and I hate to feel like I'm outside of my area of expertise. However, there appears to be an opportunity to highlight if we do not have Black-owned, asset managers with $5 billion, is there an opportunity to look at organizations like Voya or organizations like SEI that there's a requirement that says that you should have a certain number of sub-advisors, if there's a such thing, right? Work with that are not, say, members of the organization, but, you know, sub-advisors, smaller businesses that you do partnership with. 1, 2, you know, do we look at their leadership teams? You know, when we think about diversity, when we think about a woman-owned business or asset manager, you know, what does that look like? And do we have a metric that we look at that says, okay, you've met the minimum requirement, you can now apply or participate in this process? And I share that because, again, from the other side of the fence, in my experience, There was a time when, in leadership roles at DuPont, we had something called preferred law firms that we worked with in Delaware. And if you wanted to do business with DuPont Legal, you had to show us that there was a minimum amount of minority members, not only of your staff, but that served on your leadership team. If you met that minimum requirement, you then could participate in a process to contract with, again, at that time, the monolith DuPont. If not, you would want to do better in your diversity, work to recruit high qualified, not only staff and legal people, but leadership, so that you then could play a role and participate in these very expensive contract opportunities for you and your firm. So I share that only as the analogy to apply to this assets under management that we don't seem to be meeting the threshold from Black-owned businesses. However, it sounds like we're just short of that threshold. So how can we get, and can we, so this becomes the recommendation around opportunity, right? Can we move on those partnerships that have been in place since '84? I'm just using the data that was shared on the call to say, okay, we need to take a fresh look at this, and we need to have an equity clause, diversity clause to your partnership with the state of Delaware. And this is what I call market shaper behavior. This is what I call leadership that other states, it sounds like some other states have already taken steps, but it certainly puts us in that place where we can, guide, who are our partners, and again, pushing that wealth opportunity to really say that we're being diverse in our thought and intention.
I want to agree with Rick that whenever there are opportunities for anyone that's doing business within the state, corporation, small business, what have you, that you are giving a fair and just opportunity for minority businesses and those African Americans to be able to partner with, even if it's from a standpoint of a particular area of their expertise that they could handle on behalf of the proposal. But to just follow up again, Madam Treasurer, to what Rick was talking about, specifically your board, could you share with us what's the term of your board and how the directors are selected to serve?
Sure. So I actually participate in 23 different boards and commissions across the state. So if we're referring to the Cash Management Policy Board, I believe their terms are 4 years, and then they are appointed by the governor. And so, as I mentioned, there are a couple that have been on the board for quite some time. There are a number of stipulations. The board has to be sort of equally representing both parties, and so I think also all 3 counties. So we have to have at least, I believe it's 2 individuals from each county, and they cannot be of the same party. So if you've got a Republican, you have to have at least a Democrat or an independent, opposite them from each county. And that is similar for most of the boards that I sit on. They're all appointed by the governor. And as I said, I think that this board has been one of the most longstanding. Some of the things I've been able to do have been around the Plans Management Board. The governor has been very receptive to filling some of the recently open slots with representation from a more diverse section of the population. So we have our chair of the board is an African-American female on the Plans Management Board, and that was based on my recommendation. And I also was able to get another minority placed on that board as well, a male. So we're doing the best we can to try to create more diversity. It's just that in certain boards, the opportunity comes up, you know, it's all kind of timing based on, and for one reason or another, we had 2 openings in the plans management board because we had one individual who moved out of the state, and another individual's time ended, and they decided not to renew their seat.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing. The next question that I have for you is, how do we find out how many boards there are that govern over all of the wealth management for the state of Delaware, so that we can see how it is diverse across the board, giving this new role of this task force?
That's a great question. I'll say this: the challenge there is that, just as an example, you know, there is a volunteer firefighters trust board, and so I'm on that board, but I'm not on every single board that transacts, if you will. So we've got endowments that are not within my grasp, and I'd have to do some research to find out exactly how you'd get all that information, because sometimes even my staff is surprised to find out that there's a new fund that was created, 8 years ago, and the treasurer's office never had anything to do with that fund, and all of a sudden someone's going, "Where's that money?" And we're discovering that it was never set up properly or something like that. I mean, this happened with one endowment where the funds were there, but the meetings never happened. And so there were no minutes around what was going on with this fund, and it was pooled with the rest of the general fund. So
I appreciate that. So going back to what Charlie said, let's look at short-term and long-term goals for those to which you govern over. Would you be able to share from a standpoint of, as we are looking for this task force to see how we can build wealth management and include more African Americans? I look at it from a standpoint of a board placement. And if you could provide how many boards that govern over what you have charge over financially to make selections for, even though the governor is appointing, could you share that list with us?
yeah, so I could share that with you. I can list it now, or I can share it separately. It's like I said, it's
send it documented to State Representative Dorsey Walker's assistant. She can then disseminate it out to us via email.
Yes, that'd be great.
And I wanted to, I'm sorry.
And then later, given everything else that's on your plate right now, as we continue to evolve into various phases, we would love the opportunity to see exactly how many are available in the state of Delaware and who we may need to do additional outreach to as a part of this initiative for wealth management for African Americans.
And then I would like, go ahead. I would like to add, I'm sorry, I can go ahead. I would like to add, because we have to take this down just a couple more notches to Rick's point. And thank you for pulling that out, Rick. We first need to identify in the state of Delaware, what pure talent do we have in our state specifically that are Black, that are eligible? We have to start there, because what if we don't have, what if we only have 3 or 4 throughout the entire state that's carrying licenses? We also need to identify, because I want to make sure we're very clear, this committee is not addressing minority and women. We're addressing Black women and Black men, right? So we have to be very clear on that, because that's what we've seen in the change of the data, that women that are not of color have received the larger percent of the pools and allocation of contracts that have diluted the Black women from being able to get equal access to those contracts because of, as you mentioned, not being able to meet the specific qualifications that's outside of the scope of possible affordability or whatever that reason may be, right? But we have to start there, because I'm working right now with a financial firm that has already addressed that globally the population or African Americans that sit in this space is less than 2%. So what percent in the state of Delaware, because we can open it up and we can change legislation, but we don't want a large percent to go outsource to meet the number, to come in-house, although you still want it to be equally distributed, but we may have a training opportunity that needs to level down. I know Dr. Young's on the line, and this may be an area that emerging wealth leaders, it needs to be addressed even at the college level in order to move the needle for African Americans to enter into the market. And then as we're changing policies and procedures at this level, specifically, they then can move in without the complexities of what those who are Black have faced previously in the past. So we got to be very, because we may only have 5 or 6. And then my next question for the treasurer, and I appreciate all the data, because we talked about this yesterday in our meeting, is that it's the technology criteria that's restricting some African Americans from doing business in certain fields specifically because there are requirements. And so, and if we don't have the capital to put that in, we've seen this on the construction side. The affiliate, you mentioned affiliates, but even at the affiliate side, we now have to charge the affiliates to see what percent of African Americans are in the affiliation group, because all they have to do in the contracting phase is they just have to say that they solicited and they were not able to locate. They made the attempt, but they weren't able to locate and still be awarded because they weren't able to locate. So in Delaware, what do we have? We got to go there. Who do we have that's pure talent that meets the criteria, regardless of the security thresholds? But what do we do in order to allow them to develop those partnerships or relationships with Voya in order to enter into the market? We may not have a large pool.
Yeah, and Tanya, you're exactly right. You don't have a large pool around the world.
Right.
Finance is not that pretty. I spent my life in it, came out of Yale and stayed in it, banking, all that kind of stuff. And so I understand it, but it's like STEM. People aren't going at it because marketing, and we have to get it straight. For African Americans, marketing, sales, that's A1. This, I think we're very, very fortunate and blessed to have Kyle here. We do different sides of the same kind of coin. And I understand finance real well. The best people I know Pew Capital extremely well because I knew Mary since she was a freshman in college. But the other thing about it is the fact that, that's why I deal a lot out of New York and out of DC and places like this. I came here because of DuPont, but I didn't come here because there's a large banking system here, a large such thing. So most of the folks who are going to do the things that Kyle's talking about, other than Kyle, is going to be not from here. Even Voya, they may have an office here, not from here, most places. So you're bringing up an excellent point, kind of at the end of the day, hate to use this term, but dumbing it down to build it up. And the issue becomes like the treasurer talked about, she mentioned primary. So the issue is the fact that what's the secondary? Because we were just talking just recently to Abbott on an issue. And Abbott said, we got $8 million that we spend on leases. You're not gonna make any money, because he's gonna give to one person, you pay all those leases. They use part of their minority program. You don't make a whole lot of money paying them. That's all you do. You take their list and you pay A, B, C, and D, and they give you a couple of dollars. But they treat it as $80 million back to their pool. So I think we're in an excellent situation here. And I think Rick had mentioned it, where the opportunity exists. And with a person like Kyle, who's here, we get to tap into that with him, the treasurer, and sitting down with these boards and everything else. Because people say all the time, I've seen it forever, and things are coming back around now. It's like, we don't have any, we can't find any. With Kyle at the table, you may not be able to find them, but he can find them because those are his brothers, his sisters, his whatever. So I think that we're in a very, very good space here. And the fact that the treasurer is sharing this information with us gives us a unique opportunity, and we have to seize this momentum to just break it down and build it up and see where we get in, where we fit in until we grow to the point where we're the it. So I think this is an excellent situation, and we have the pieces here, the business knowledge, everything else, to kind of push that whole situation forward, because folks could always say, I don't know any. And you go 100 years of not knowing any. So now I think, with this conversation, with the treasurer being here, which I really, really appreciate, because at the end of the day, we have to get behind the curtain and start understanding and what she's doing with the governor about diversity and things of that nature. She's a champion. So while you got a champion, as we say in athletics, you got to ride it. As long as you can, you got to ride that. Thank you. Apologies.
And also to build on what Tanya was saying real quick, because I know we're running out of time. I totally agree with what she said. And to Troy's point, I've known Kyle for a while. Like, there's one Kyle out of 700,000. So, and Kyle can get tired if we keep trying to put him on 15 boards and all this other stuff. So the discussion question is, how do we become more involved with wealth management opportunities? First thing, support the local association of National Association of Black Accountants at each of our different colleges and universities, because that's going to be the groups that are going to come out who are going to want to get involved in these sort of financial services opportunities. Also, the understanding that you'd have to have a certain book of business. So I spent 12 years, as Kyle knows, I spent 12 years as a certified financial planner. And it's not pretty. It's just not pretty out there for a person of color. And so the next thing is encourage people to go get their securities licenses, get their 65, get their 66, get their life accident health, get their Series 7, and even just on, we'll call it like the bottom rung here, start working as a financial advisor. Because when these board seats come up, whether or not they come up in 1 year, 5 years, 4 years, it doesn't matter unless you have a book of business. They're not just going to put you on the board because you're a person of color. You have to have been a successful advisor in the first place before they put you on there. So we have to support those, and just like pretty much every other community around Delaware, we need to start to develop a Black-owned credit union where we are managing those dollars first. It doesn't have to be $5 billion. And because what happens is when you affiliate with National Association of Black Accountants, when you use and work with an African American financial advisor or certified financial planner, when you put your dollars into a Black credit union or bank, then the application and dollars flow throughout the Black community. It does not help to have one billionaire Black person sit on one board at one time. And as we know, Delaware, it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And if there's just one of us that everyone knows and is pulling that person in 15 different directions, that person actually says, you know what, I'm a little bit tired of helping the Black community right now. So what we have to do is we have to support those, Tanya said it. It's not going to be something that a lot of us are going to see frankly, in the next 2 decades. But there's a whole crop of college people right now who are sitting at home trying to figure out what to do, where to go, and are looking for mentoring. We have to work with them to show that we support them. Those young financial advisors, we have to put our money with them. Those people who are trying to start credit unions, start investment clubs, we have to put our money with them, and that builds up the bench that will have us not have to ask this question 20 years from now.
Thank you, Dr. Dan Young. And to our Madam Treasurer, I would like to say thank you for joining us on this evening. We're running a little low on time, so what I would like to do is take the opportunity to open it up for questions for those who are in attendance. And Ms. Del Callo, if we have anyone who's in attendance from the audience who would like to ask questions or make a statement. But again, I would like to thank all the subcommittee members for your wealth of knowledge and sharing it with us. And at this time, we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah.
We currently have 4 people in attendance, and Lamar Gunn has raised his hand. So I will unmute you and you will have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Gunn, for joining us.
Outstanding. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Please proceed with your question or statement. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
I wish I had learned of this sooner, but This is a great committee and an initiative that you guys are putting on. So I appreciate the work of, it looks like, several people, most of which I think I know most, or if not all. I don't think I've ever met Mr. Day. I would tell you that to Rick's point, I think the treasurer has a unique opportunity to literally change the game tomorrow if she would like to. The opportunity to have sub-advisors with places or firms like Voya simply takes an email to say, listen, our state is on an initiative to increase diversity as far as African-American asset managers. Who do you have from a sub-advisor standpoint? Zero. Here's a list of people that we vetted and would like you to consider. Literally, it takes one email. I'm appointed with most of those places already. But for other advisors across the state, there's a handful of us. And I think, and there's some that are younger. Of course, I know Kyle and there's Greg Coverdale. I know Dan for years, but Dan's right. It's at some point you have to have elected officials that have the will to do something different and to shake it up and escape the status quo. One of the things I would also, if this committee would be interested in doing, I would ask that you do or take this to the community, meaning Wilmington, Dover, downtown, to areas where people, because there are very few asset managers or financial advisors of color, this committee and the state possibly could do something to change that, because we have this generational cycle of poverty. Because when you have guys like me, I'm busy running a business. I like to give back, and I often do. But the time that I used to be able to spend educating people that look like me is getting smaller and smaller. I like to see the state and even this committee take on more initiatives to educate folks who can relate to people who look like them, which is a benefit of giving minority firms business with the state, so that we are in a position to go back and help and pull people forward. So,
Mr. Gunn, I'm sorry, your 2 minutes is up.
yeah, I'm sorry. I got excited because this is I really like what you guys are doing here.
We thank you for your comment.
Thank you, Mr. Gunn. Ms. Del Carlo, was there anyone else who would like to speak?
Yes, I'm going to unmute Sierra Bryant. You will have 2 minutes to speak.
Hi, Representative Dorsey Walker. My name is Sierra Bryant from the Delaware Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and I am the policy specialist there. And I just wanted to briefly take a moment to invite all of you and the listeners to an economic justice summit that we're hosting with the Biden Institute in October. This event will span across a few dates in October, all Thursdays on the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th. And it's just an event to highlight the interaction of DV, domestic violence, sexual violence, and economic justice among corporations, the financial sector, and at the government level. So if you are interested in attending, I would hope that the task force could possibly share out the invite, but you can also reach me at my email, which is cbryant@dcadv.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bryant, for sharing that information. Greatly appreciate it. Ms. Del Carlo, did we have anyone else from the audience or from the public who would like to speak?
I don't see any more hands raised, but if you would like to make a public comment at this time, please use the raise hand function.
Well, while we wait, I'll just make a statement. I think we had a great discussion, and thank you, Treasurer Davis, for joining us today. It appears that there's a body of work that you have oversight and management of, but there's another piece that you don't. So for the leadership and Representative Sherry Dorsey Walker and staff, I would ask if we could identify those that manage the state's pension, better understand, so we can maybe even have a conversation with them to stage a similar line of questions as we think about access and opportunity. That's the first question, and that's specific for the meeting minutes. Secondly, if you, it sounded like, and I heard it once or twice now, and when Dan Young and or Lamar Gunn or Kyle Myers repeats anything that I say, I feel good about it. So the sub-advisor idea, and I don't know that I gave you an opportunity to react. Is that something that seems like it makes sense, or something that we could explore, right?
Sure. So we have Voya hires 4 representatives, financial advisors that are local to Delaware. 2 of them are white males, and then the other 2 are both females, one of whom is one of whom is over 65, and the other is a minority female. So we do try to do some of that, and we do ask some of those things. Unfortunately, with the most recent hire that they had, they actually tell me in any case that they didn't have any minority applications. And so they ended up going with a white male in, I believe it was Kent County's representative. But we've got a great group, and I think I think that we definitely can look for more of those types of opportunities. It has been something that we've been looking for in our RFP process. I just haven't had very many to go through. And even when it's tough, I will say this, it's tough when we have, only 3 responses to an RFP, and to navigate that and sort of say, we want this of you. And we do ask for it. We ask that they show us that they have, if it's not in their leadership, that they start to make efforts in that way. And I can say that we've also looked at potential proxy voting, and outside of my role, when it comes to our contracts and things like that, I am part of the Democratic Treasurers Association, and we are very active in pressing not only our large firms, but also smaller firms looking for more diversity, even if we're not doing business with them here in Delaware. So I think there are a number of opportunities and ways in which we can move the needle and push for that type of thing. Absolutely.
And Treasurer, I'd like to add something to, or a question to what Rick asked, which is, I know you mentioned earlier about the participation from smaller regional banks in the RFP process. We are working with, our firm that is working with a significant minority-owned bank formed in 1972 with pretty stable pockets. In fact, we are working to bring them here to have a presence. And I would love for there to at least be the initial stages of a conversation to see how over time the state, your office might be able to work with this bank. Because one of the things that they do is they lend in ways that affect impoverished communities. They ran this program in Detroit, where they were able to get one organization to put $5 million in deposits with them. They were able to loan $25 million to residents of Detroit, and over the 6 years, they've had 1 default, and in 6 years.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's an incredible feat. But they have the history of doing this. They also help inner city, or I shouldn't say inner city. They help people who are stuck in payday loans get out of payday loans and into formalized credit cards and formalized credit products that help them to be better. So I'd love to be able to connect them with you as well.
That would be fantastic. It's definitely something that we have worked toward, is specifically looking at where CRA funding is going. And so absolutely, these are things that we look into, we're very cognizant of, and we are trying to push that CRA funding comes back to the communities that need it most. The SEC recently put out new guidelines that we were very strongly against, because some of those CRA funds may not necessarily go to the areas that need it most. And so we'll see how that turns out.
And I just asked Madam Treasurer, I know Rashmi Rangan has done a lot of data with Stepping Stone. I mean, some of that data doesn't necessarily have to be duplicated, because I know probably 5 years ago, I was heavily involved in the CRA and ensuring that allocation of funds was distributed. I mean, she has data that's beyond data for the state. She's been advocating this for years.
Yeah, no, what I'm talking about is when we do our RFPs, we want to ensure that whomever we're doing business with, they may sort of hit all the boxes within the RFP, but then we want to see that they are sticking to their own guidelines, and that their guidelines are such that those CRA funds are very conscientiously doled out and meaningful.
Thank you.
Madam Treasurer, I do want to be respectful of your time, and I'm so grateful that you joined us today. Please know that if there's legislation that you need as far as the General Assembly is concerned, I'm just a Zoom call away or a text away, and there's a willingness of this committee to work with your office so that we can bring about the necessary changes so we can start to see diversity up and down the state. So thank you again for your time, and to all the subcommittee members, thank you for a job well done, as always. And I shall see you at the next committee meeting. Again, thank you, Madam Treasurer, for your time.
Thank you. And likewise, I'd love to continue working together. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, this concludes the Economic Empowerment Opportunities Committee meeting in conjunction with the African American Task Force. And we thank you, each and every one of you, for your time. Be well.
Take care.